Welcome to the OpenRS session. We have three speakers today, or presenters. Donna Bacon, this guy, Ian, who I think all of you know well, Ian Ibbotson, and myself, Tim Auger. And we're going to start off with Donna Bacon, MOBIUS Consortium.
Morning.
Hey, can everyone on Zoom see your...
I hope so. Repetition is good. So if you were at the panel yesterday, you're probably going to hear some of the same things. So repetition is good. I'm Donna Bacon from the MOBIUS Consortium. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the MOBIUS Consortium. So repetition's good. We're a multi-type consortium based in Columbia, Missouri. We have members in Missouri, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Iowa. We have 62 academic libraries sharing an ILS. We have 19 standalone library systems that join those 62 for resource sharing for a total of 80 members with 230 libraries. We offer many services to our members, but our main focus remains as a shared ILS and resource sharing system. We were formed in 1998 with Missouri state appropriations to create a shared ILS for the academic libraries in the state and a resource sharing system. Innovative Interfaces was chosen in 1998, and we haven't done an RFP until 2021. We have 7 Sierra clusters or servers that host those 62 academic library systems, and we currently use InReach for resource sharing. Our union catalog has over 12 million deduplicated bibliographic records with about 30 million items, and our members fulfill about 350,000 items annually. We do, however, load over 25 million records annually, which includes patrons, items, bibs, ebooks, etc. And our libraries, on average, each save a little over $46,000 annually by sharing an ILS. However, in 2021, our membership felt it was time, due to changes in the ILS marketplace and the purchase of Innovative by Clarivate, to do an RFP. So in early 2021, we issued an RFI to gather some general information about what was available in the marketplace for our members. And then we did an RFP in November of 2021 for a shared ILS and a resource sharing system. We chose Folio as our next shared ILS and OpenRS as our next resource sharing system. We needed to find an open source system that was unmediated and fully integrated into multiple ILS systems. We were lucky in that EBSCO and Knowledge Integration's RFP response showed us a clear technical path to accomplishing the necessary enhancements to OpenRS and gave us confidence that it could be achieved. OpenRS's architecture is based on microservices, on a microservices approach, creating a more modern method to quickly add new capabilities. You'll hear more from Ian and Tim about how all of that's going to work. Why we chose OpenRS? Because our consortium was no longer tied to one vendor who controls the resource sharing software, its features, and what ILSs can connect to it. EBSCO and Knowledge Integration is committed to developing OpenRS to be fully integrated with all kinds of disparate ILSs with the features that we require to make it work. They made a financial and development commitment to meet our time frame to go live with OpenRS by spring of 2024. We believe that OpenRS offers more flexible opportunities to include a wider variety of ILS platform as our consortium grows and evolves. We started by forming an OpenRS working group that includes all of our member libraries. They're working with EBSCO and Knowledge Integration on a weekly basis or bi-monthly meetings to check their development progress. So far, EBSCO and Knowledge Integration have met all their development deadlines for OpenRS. We are still on target to go live in May of 2024. As far as the future, we're hoping to add more member libraries with additional disparate systems. Right now, we're adding Sierra, Polaris, and Folio. We're also looking forward to a peer-to-peer system connecting OpenRS to OpenRS systems and adding more libraries to our Folio shared ILS. And Tim and Ian will talk more about the future of OpenRS and some additional functionality that will go beyond what we've asked for to get started with OpenRS. I'm going to pass this on to Ian or to Tim.
Sorry. What was that?
Okay.
Good. So it's very comfy down there. I think I'll stand up. All right. And hopefully those of you on Zoom are able to see and get it. Oh, yes. Is that better? Thank you. All right. Fantastic. So, my name is Tim Auger. I'm product manager for EBSCO Folio and the product owner for the open resource sharing project. First thing I wanted to do is talk with you about a little personal story that I've just shared with Lucy, and she shared the same story with me. So when I was a kid, one of my favorite television programs was a documentary series called Connections. Anyone here? Oh, good, fantastic. Yes. So it was a short-lived series. It was only a couple of seasons long. But Burke was a science historian who created, wrote, and presented the series. It really focused on interdisciplinary components that led to scientific discovery and how they built upon one another successively to create innovations and changes in society. I think what made Connections really valuable for me was a focus on cause and effect, not just in the context of scientific achievements, but also cultural and political events and natural occurrences and natural disasters, and how all of these contexts intersected with one another, sometimes at the most inopportune time, and other times to create really unexpected outcomes. So in other words, events through time bonded like nodes in a network, and sometimes they triggered other events, and sometimes they stayed steady and the lights just sort of flickered out. And what I'd really like to do is show you an entire episode, but I realize the sound is not going to come through. So I'm going to invite you to go after this session, take just a few minutes. You can find it on YouTube. It's really important that you get to the first episode of the series and listen to the first few minutes, because Burke is going to take you through his thinking about what he believes is important to focus on throughout the series, and that is the interconnectedness of things throughout society. They're just not scientific discoveries in there. There's all sorts of ripple effects, as he says, a ripple effect in the pond throughout all of these different contexts. So you'll enjoy it, I guarantee it. So how does a vicious cycle work, and why this isn't just a clunky transition from one slide to another? So as defined by the OED, Oxford English Dictionary, a vicious cycle is a sequence of reciprocal cause and effect events in which two or more elements intensify and aggravate one another, leading inexorably to a worsening of the situation. In other words, a sequence of compounded negative effects. With that, a few example elements of a vicious cycle. Have you ever had the experience where you ordered something online and you did not get what you advertised? It might be close, it might be something completely different. You order a mop, you get a sponge, right? Sorts of experiences. Or if you paid for overnight shipping and it didn't show up overnight, it showed up a couple days. Or, and this has happened to me more than once, believe it or not, the number of items shows you only one left. That's a signal. It really doesn't exist. Okay, you don't get it. And in a couple days, you get a cancellation notice. Now imagine if you needed these items for your child's 5th birthday party. This happened to me, all 3 events at once. And I can say it was stressful enough to put on your first 5th birthday party for your child. It was more difficult to sort of make up for it. So it added a lot of stress. Or in the case of a patron, a term paper, or a grant-funded project, or an application for a grant. Now imagine how would you feel the next time you use that service? Would you just go in and think, everything's going to be fine, right? Probably not. You probably have a little built-in resentment. And that is the start of a vicious cycle. And you might even choose just to bypass that, right? You might choose to go somewhere else to get your needs met. All these real-life instances have an impact on the overall user's perception of the service. As a service provider, how do you know what's happening, and how do you prevent those patrons, in say an ILL context, from leaving your service for an alternative source? How many of you have talked with instructors or department heads who've decided to go ahead and find their own subscription, or pay for materials on their own because it's a more reliable source than what you would get through an interlibrary loan system? So, how to stop the vicious circle? So going back to 1987, OhioLink, really the pioneers of the DCB model for interlibrary loans, recommended the implementation of a statewide electronic cataloging system to address these very types of problems. In 1992, 6 libraries started to build out what became the OhioLink Central Cataloger, that is a union catalog. And out of this grew the reciprocal borrowing program, which launched in 1996. Some of the distinctive characteristics included automated harvesting, plus clustering of holdings for improved findability, patron authentication against an ILS account instead of a separate account, automatic item selection based on the soonest to fulfill, and that led to no staff mediation. 5, and this is a big one, this really results in streamlined and inexpensive operations, integration into circulation directly, circulation proper. And finally, on-site borrowing at another library as really a convenience feature. So if you live closer to a public library than your own campus, you can walk into the public library and pick an item up off the shelf and use your credentials. Just again, that one set of credentials that you use for everything else to gain access to those services. So these changes were not simply improvements to the existing manual ILL practices. So in other words, we didn't, or I should say, Innovative did not build a faster horse. They changed the paradigm. And collectively, they fundamentally changed how resource sharing works at very large scale. And as a result, these changes led to a virtuous cycle amongst consortium beyond OhioLink. So by 2005, so just in about 8 years, InReach expanded to statewide implementations in Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Missouri, Pennsylvania, Maine, and South Carolina. And I can tell you, it wasn't just that. We were expanding each and every one of those systems as well. So thousands of libraries were being added over the course of just a few years. And then also there were, InReach supported large consortium in Massachusetts, California, Rhode Island, Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand, Spain, and the UAE, and started making headway in Nevada, Texas, Wyoming, Illinois, and also Iowa. There was really a great expansion during the early and mid 2000s for the InReach product, and we all have OhioLink to thank for that. So this type of system has some very tangible benefits, leading to a very dramatic improvement in the interlibrary loan business domain. First of all, these systems traditionally have a very high first to fill rate. So we understand what a high fill rate is, right? It's like everything except for cancellations, right? A high first to fill rate means in a dynamic rota means that the first library that's selected to fill the request does it 90 to 95% of the time. And the second and third and fourth before, it ends its, before it meets a terminal state, 3 or 4 and 5% are expected to be filled by the other members that have an item. So very, very high fill rates. Fast turnaround. That's because of the automation system that's all built into it. And the fact that it's running through circulation, not waiting on somebody to push a button to select somebody to supply, another library to supply the item. Very low total cost. These aren't just MOBIUS numbers, but they're also the numbers for several other consortium. On average, about $1 to $2 per transaction. That is total cost of operation. The software, the labor, the courier service. And per transaction, I mean the entire cycle until, again, it hits a terminal state, meaning complete. Also, ILS agnostic. In a lot of cases, it meant middleware, but wherever possible, direct connections with other ILSs. And as I noted before, it's managed in the library services platform, circulation workflows. So again, you're not talking about very highly trained or specialized labor. You can get student workers, and often is the case in a lot of academic libraries that are actually processing these requests, meaning going to the stacks with a paging list, bringing it down, and processing it as if it just belongs to another branch in their system or another campus. And then also, this is where it all meets the, or it all sort of sums up the virtuous cycle, and that is very high levels of customer satisfaction. There are just scads of examples of this. Every one of these consortium had printed marketing material that focused on the end user and their experience with the system. Faculty members in particular are very, very vocal about not losing access to the service once they have it. So at the time, a 90 to 95% fill rate wasn't anything close to what you would get in ILL. But current day, I've recently spoken with SUNY, even after significant improvements to the software, the middleware that they use with Iliad, they've seen numbers reach to close to 70%. That's after a whole round and a whole series of new developments. 70%, I can tell you, Donna's consortium would never accept 70%. It would cost them headcount in order to continue to offer the level of service that they have now. Oh, and also it's like 7 to 14 day turnaround on average. So you're going to see those very high level of customer services. And just to relay yet another story, I don't want to go over my time, but George Makovic is the executive director of the Colorado Prospector System. And in the, I think it was about 2010 or 2011, the gas industry, natural gas industry was tanking. And Western Colorado relies upon the gas. They are a huge source for gas, natural gas in the Western United States. The libraries would give up heads before they gave up their prospector service, and they did. And that's unfortunate, but it just goes to show you the value of these types of systems. Okay, but now what about OpenRS? How do we improve upon the DCB model? Do we just simply scrap the innovations of the past and hope with the hopes that we'll make a giant leap in innovation that creates even greater optimization? Well, probably not. MOBIUS came to us with 20 years of experience with the model, using the InReach product, and that model and the implementation of the model has already proven itself out. So the plan became start with the solution we all know will work, and then once that's done, innovate through innovation. And so that is what we have today. right here, or sorry, this is what we have today. Let me get to that screen. This is what we have today, capabilities to date. We've taken the existing DCB model and created a new set of technologies, a new set of designs and refined algorithms, and shared our collective experiences in the domain to build in the hooks for later advancements. Between myself and Ian, who will be speaking next, I probably shouldn't state the numbers, but we probably have well over 50 years experience in resource sharing. So here is where we stand today with the DCB product. We have Sierra record harvesting working end-to-end, Union catalog instance clustering and deduping, consolidated holdings. We have patron authentication. We have a discovery scaffold, which has really served as an interim step to integrating with an OPAC, and has been really helpful for search, display, and auditability for showing MOBIUS, our partner, keeping them up to date on the advancements that we've made, both in terms of record harvesting and clustering, but also with respect to requesting. We have OPAC search and results. That is as a product that is created by EBSCO, and but we have also created it in a generic way so that we can hook into other discovery layers as well. And then we also have full circulation support for CR. So that's where we are today. And what you get with that is a lot of foundational work so that subsequent iterations and other platforms are much easier, much faster to build upon. So capabilities for Q3 and Q4 of this year. We will have folio instance harvesting. That's just about done, actually. Folio requesting and circulation. Patron authentication, which we are also mid-flight in, both for SSO and native authentication, like patron and barcode. Patron name and barcode, or patron barcode and PIN. Item selection, automatic item selection, and pickup at any participating member library. OPAC full record display, improved clustering precision, which will, as I told that everyone who's working on the project, will be an ongoing work stream to the day that we're done working on the project. And then improved findability resources in the Union catalog. With the beginning of the year, Q1 and Q2 of 2024, we will have the Polaris library system integrated with record harvesting and requesting and circulation. We'll continue on with that work stream of improved clustering precision, improved findability of resources in the Union catalog. That just goes hand in hand. And again, some more item selection and pickup at member libraries will continue on. There's some enhancements there. And then also an administration app, and that's really important for self-service system. And that's, again, one of MOBIUS's requirements was we want to be able to onboard our customers, our new members, when it works for us and not rely upon you. So, no offense taken. I've been there on the professional services side. This will work out just fine for everyone. And finally, we also have some circulation exception reports. So if items are stuck in a status for a given period of time, you'll be able to go in and take a look at it and take action on it. And then finally, live, May 22nd with MOBIUS. Oops. So this is sort of where we're going in the future. Donna spoke to some of it as well. And although I can't exactly tie it back into the series because we didn't get a chance to take a look at it, I'll still walk through my thoughts on it. So one of the main themes of the show is that sometimes a cause and effect and its corresponding effects are often unpredictable and don't always lead you where you might expect or want to go. And this is where I'd like to draw our attention, because while the DC model is streamlined, it may not be the only area for advancement that resource sharing can have an impact on. So take, for example, Donna spoke to the, sort of the cost savings that some of her members experience on average, something like $47,000 a year. It's a significant sum, right? And that's great. So, but there are perhaps if we take another couple steps beyond that, there are perhaps some other opportunities that might be around the corner. So, so that again, that's a real cost savings. That's real data you can use to buy additional resources. But there are also some hidden costs if you were to buy all those resources instead of borrowing, like housing, maintenance, and end-of-life transition costs. Those are all real costs, right? You don't just have to accept those costs going forward, perhaps. And if there was perhaps an opportunity to transition that savings into an investment account, right? What would you do? Think about it as your own pocketbook, right? Or better yet, what if you could bundle that savings into something that would benefit the whole consortium and your own patrons? What if the purchasing decisions you made were influenced by the collective and vice versa? What would that look like? Could you figure out new ways to optimize your spend that could result in higher volume of usage? What if you're able to look across multiple dimensions, like rate of loans across all formats and instances, and works not just in your own library, but in your member libraries? What would that look like? And beyond, say, collaborative collection development, what if it was larger and also encompassed collaborative collection management? Now, I know that happens, right? There are shared offsite storage systems, right, where libraries share the burden of that cost. But what if we take it further upstream, like kind of the current paradigm speak to that as like shift left? What happens when you push all that decision making upstream? What kind of downstream effects might it have? If you collaborated on the entire life cycle, not just the acquisition of materials. And one that factored into your approval plan automatically. What would that look like? And yes, I am well aware there are lots of hurdles to making that happen. But if there's value to the idea, there is a way to make it happen. There are also some other items here I'm just going to, for sake of time, I'm not going to get deep into, but processing and logistics, there is still room for optimization. And it's really just kind of one area that I'm going to speak to. So if you were able to, and you do, right? You put your material into a container and then you ship that material in the container to another location. What if that other location was only had to scan the container, right? What would that look like? By the way, I had the opportunity to build this system at Innovative Interfaces a long time ago for, it was Trinity College, it might have been someone else, but it's been a long time. But they estimated that the amount of effort decreased by 2/3. Means the cost. So I have an example here. Let's say that you have 10 items, and this is based on MOBIUS numbers. You have 10 items for your back office sort of onesie process where you're just scanning one item after the next, right? And you can put 10 items in a container, and in total, it takes 100 seconds. So 10 seconds per item, 10 items, times 350,000 fulfillments, which is Mobius's annual request rate. That equals about 9,720 hours of labor. If you cut that by a third, where you're just scanning the container, you have 2,917 total hours. What would you do with that 5,800 hours? Just think about that. What could you buy? What could you subscribe to? What could you build? What kind of software could you build? Thinking a little more broadly in terms of resource sharing, there are other ideas that come to mind, including how to leverage linked data and direct marketing to your patrons by market segment or persona. This is something that Gloria and I have spoken about for a long time, and there are some real opportunities here to get patrons pulled back in to the library resources from external sources. There really are. And it's all about marketing in this case, but it's about how you apply technology to fulfill those marketing goals. And when I say it's marketing, it's not about selling really, it's really about awareness, right? Once you get someone hooked into a service, there is that virtual cycle that starts to spin, and people will automatically find the fastest way to get between point A and point B. You just have to get them to point A, which is the trick. And also I'll just note one more thing, multi-network. So this is a resounding theme with the coalition. They would like to have the ability to do reciprocal borrowing between themselves, and also some non-returnables work as well. So I don't want to lose track of how important it is. Right now, those solutions are fairly clunky in the marketplace. And what we want to get to is a frictionless environment so that the patron stays within their own native interface and doesn't have to leave it, right? We don't want patrons to leave. We want patrons to stay where they're at, because that is what helps build in that virtuous cycle. And finally, just a couple of notes on OpenRS. You heard Donna on this, and I'm just adding on top of her points. I think what's most exciting about the group is that they're ambitious in their goals. This isn't just a coalition espousing great ideas. It's really a group rooted in pragmatism and getting things done. Multi-network, I can assure you, is one of many goals. So as an example of what two of the members have going on right now, MOBIUS and Prospector already have the capability of sharing via a peer-to-peer product in InReach. And even with the state of Kansas in between them, they figured out a way to make it happen. And very, very comparative, low effort. And so with a more streamlined implementation of their P2P, currently just really a peer-to-peer solution, I would expect the volume of fulfillments to climb precipitously once they're able to overcome that friction. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ian.
Questions in chat.
Oh, sorry. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, Tim. If I do what Tim did and said we're going to innovate through innovation, you can throw things out. That was innovative. Yeah, well done. Okay. Tim said I could geek out. That is what I'm going to do. I can only apologize. Hold on. Yeah. So those of you who heard me talk about this before will be sick of this slide. And there's a danger this sounds like an appeal to authority. So I've pretty much worked with ILL systems my entire working life. From coming out of university straight into Fretwell Downing, I worked on a European funded research project, TIER for the UK's relationship to the EU, called DALI, Documents and Libraries Integrated, with my friends from Index Data, who are somewhere. And friends from Index Data did the work on Z950, and we did the work on ISO ILL. So when I talk about this model, it's not rooted in any kind of short-term business opportunity. It's rooted in the pain of ILL for certain classes of things. And this model is basically saying, look, up here, traditional ILL protocols like ISO 18626, which is the current incarnation, ISO 10161, which was the previous incarnation. They're magnificent things. They mean that the University of Chicago can send a request for an item to Cambridge University in the UK. You can send basically a citation. You don't have to give them an item ID. You can just send a description of the thing you want. You could send a request to the British Library and say, hey, that kind of handwritten notebook by the guy with the white hair that was in the Galapagos Islands, but apparently there's a copy that's got the handwritten marginalia. Can you get me a photocopy of that? Like, you could send that request to the National Museum in the UK as an ILL, and you would get back a photocopy of Darwin's work. That is, like, for me, the most exciting thing about ILL. And I think sometimes when we talk about mediation, like, mediation is not a bad thing. For that request, it needs a human. It needs a skilled human who can understand what one librarian is saying to another one. And the protocol helps make that happen. What we found, Tim and I he spoke to our history, as we started to build consortial systems, what we did was took the protocols and we started to profile them. And that's a really common thing to happen with international standards. You start profiling and layering agreements. You say, oh, crikey, in order for our consortium to be able to share these resources, what we're going to do is we're going to stick this structured text in the note field so that you can understand something that I want to convey to my other partners in the network. So you go from a very vanilla protocol through to something which is slightly more structured with a kind of more detailed reciprocal arrangement. And that's cool. You've got to be really careful here, because one of the dangers is you might accidentally extend the protocol in a way that means you're not implementing the standard anymore. And you've got to be really careful about that. You don't want to be saying, we do ISO 18626, when you've accidentally added some fields to the protocol that means actually Cambridge University could never receive one of your requests because it won't validate as a request. So, going from like 1994 when I was working in ILL, and this is what we've done. We had this model, back in 1994, there was a Unix program called Cookie, which everybody had it. When you logged in to your Unix system, Fortune Cookie would give you a piece of advice. And one of the ones that always used to pop up for me was every time, or whenever you have a hammer, every problem becomes a nail. And that's a little bit like what was happening up here. Like, we were using ILL for damn everything. And we made it work. But, kudos. Folks made it work. A lot of effort. What was really interesting when we saw the MOBIUS RFP, I just hadn't understood, I don't think, what actually worked in libraries all my life, and I hadn't really understood what was going on. And when I spoke to Donna and when I read the RFP, it became very, very apparent that something else was going on with these guys. And I think a lot of the things Tim was just talking about that efficiency, these public libraries out there, they have staff members. All they do is go pull books off shelves, put them on vans, take them off vans, put them back on shelves. They're circulating items to their own patrons, and they're doing a lot of that. They just can't cope with two processes. Like, that's what they do. They get their pick list, they process it. They don't care if it's going to another patron in their library or to somewhere in the network. That's what they're doing. They're working their process, and they're not belligerent about it. But as we've been testing DCB, I've thoroughly enjoyed conversations that I've had with people from Springfield Green, just to call out some of them. They're really passionate about what they do, but they're also petrified that you're going to do something which is going to break their workflows and make them spend more effort, and make their lives harder. And it became apparent that these are two different things. They're completely complementary, but there's very much the short head and the long tail. So mediation isn't bad, except where you actually don't need to mediate. We don't want to involve staff unless there is some special reason to get involved. Like, I pull it off the shelf and it's falling apart. Oh, okay, I really can't ship this across the network. I've got to do something about that. If it's an okay item, I just want to put it through my ordinary process, whatever that is. No difference between a local patron and a remote patron. So I think, and I'm speaking very personally now, this is my opinion, this is not fact. I think these two models are incredibly complementary. What you've got is just high throughput process, just do it. Just get as much through that as you can with as little friction as you can, versus more specialist stuff going on, more interesting things that do require professionals to communicate and to collaborate and to exchange ideas. So this is a model which I quite like, and it's a model that gives sense to how all these things work. But Tim talked about consortia to consortia lending. There's a fair chance that that has to live up here. All of this stuff is very much predicated on shared indexes. I'm saying, hey, we've got a shared catalog, and I can tell you exactly which item it is that I want. And I can send an ID, and I can send a patron ID, and it all just works. ILL is still predicated on pass by value, if you like. I'm going to give you a description of the item that I want, rather than giving you an ID. Now, you can put IDs in an ILL request, absolutely. But the protocol is still fundamentally about me passing a citation to a colleague in another institution and them saying, yeah, we've got that. We can lend it. Or no, we haven't. Oh, spent longer on that than I intended to. So the DCB hub, forgive the word. We're struggling a little bit with the terminology. DCB, small letter, lowercase DCB. That's one of the ways we describe this. I prefer to call it the OpenRS hub. I think ILL is still very much a peer-to-peer. It is. It's great. You have a kind of network model where libraries talk to libraries. ILL does that perfectly. In lowercase DCB, we definitely need some coordination in the middle, because we've got to keep track of a lot of different things. I'll talk about what those are in a little while. At the end of the day, though, what this solution is doing is basically creating a virtual library where the library consists of all the items from all the member catalogs and all the patrons. And if I lend something to a patron, it doesn't matter which institution they are in, and it doesn't matter where the item's coming from. It's just one process. The lending institution will have a circulation record, and the borrowing institution will have a circulation record. It will all just look like ordinary circulation. When a lending institution gets a request and the librarian goes and pulls the item off the shelf and it falls apart in their hands, the cancellation process will be the cancellation process that they would normally go through. It won't be some special thing where they go to a different interface. It'll just be, oh, well, no, sorry, we're not going to supply that. Find it from somewhere else. This is really important. It is not our intention. If a library has chosen a vendor, they've probably done that for a reason. They have paid a lot of money. Well, unless you're using Folio, in this case, your quid's in. They've paid a lot of money to a vendor. It is not our job to usurp the ILL functionality of that system. If you look at Innovative, Innovative has an ILL module. It also has a direct consortial borrowing module. I think that's evidence that these two things they both do different jobs. They exist in systems. We are not trying to work around a library. If a library says, we want to stay on Sierra, it's our job to come to them. It's not our job to force them to adopt a different solution. And I think that came through quite strongly in what I understood Donna was talking about. Our loan rules. This is important. When loans happen in a DCB solution, they are controlled by the lending institution's loan rules and the borrowing institution's loan rules. There's some mediation that goes on there, but we don't have any special categories. We do map between different categories, but fundamentally, I'm not building a different set of loan rules outside of the host library management systems. You know, a lending institution will understand the patron type of a patron in a remote system and be able to have a loan rule which supports that, which is kind of important, I think.
It's me.
You're a bad man. Okay, I'll do it. There we go. And the last one, this super excites me. Because we're building this virtual network of libraries and patrons, there's a sense for me in which the library becomes an identity broker for its patrons. I've got some slides later on, but we heard about the collections at Library of Congress. One of the cute things that starts to emerge from this model is I could go to Library of Congress and can say, hey, here's my Tulsa library card. Can I borrow something using my patron identity from Tulsa? And I genuinely believe what we can do with DCB is we could federate the identity from a library so that I could go and borrow something from LC using my Tulsa member, I'm picking on Tulsa, using that library card. And that's really important, right? Because if you want to do CDL, patron identity is really important. We had some colleagues from an organization called Name and Associates who wrote us a paper talking about the legal ramifications of CDL and about how careful organizations had to be about looking after the content that we're encoding. I don't think scanning an item for an ILL and then passing it in the clear over the network to a patron's home institution so that they can then DRM encode it actually passes the smell test from a legal point of view. What we can do here, because we've got patron identity, the lending library can actually DRM encode something for the patron. And there can be a direct relationship between the lending institution and the patron with the patron's home system included in it, but I can send an item to the patron. I can encode it for that patron using this federated identity. And there's some interesting things there, I think. Maybe we'll pick up on that at the end if I've got time. I own time for it. Right. Current logical components. Bit of a deep dive. DCB uses the idea of a host LMS adapter. We can write adapters for anything. We have repurposed code that we wrote for Reshare. Hats off to Reshare. Well done. So we can bring that code in. The difference here is the technology is based on a library called Project Reactor. All of these things are streaming interfaces, and that's important for the throughput. Mobius had some requirements about how quickly they wanted to be able to update the shared index in particular. So I've got some stats later on about just what kind of throughput we can get through when we're harvesting the data. I didn't draw lines on this because it would have got very messy, but what's happening is we open streams to all these things and they basically get injected into the core. They get injected into the clustering service. Clustering is a tricky technology. Traditionally, if you go check out a paper on clustering from a computing library over the road, you'll see that clustering usually is done in two steps. It's usually done in a step called blocking, where you gather together in as lucid terms as you can all the things that might be the same. And then there's an actual clustering step where usually that's rule-based, and you pick apart the 20 items that might be the same into 3 groups of things which are different. And, like the most obvious thing that can happen there is, for some reason, the electronic one got mixed in with the physical one, and they are kind of different things. So blocking, we know that basically blocking pulls all the works together, and the rules pick apart the instances and group the instances appropriately. I've put on here the co-referencing source. There is a really interesting opportunity. As we looked at the code for the clustering service, currently the clustering service does just that. We drink from the fire hose, we group together all the records from all the Mobius libraries, and then we cluster them. So didn't I innovated through innovation? What we realized was there was a massive opportunity there to pull in services like Bibliograph. And I say like because I would not allow DCB to be stovepipe connected to one source. But what we could do is to use a co-referencing source like Bibliograph as a spine to hang these records off instead. Maybe we could work with LC. We could use LC as a spine on which we could hang bibliographic records. And that would mean instead of, sometimes the clustering goes a bit wrong. Maybe I'll do a demo later on. If we instead hang those instances off a spine, something interesting might happen. So we don't do this today, but this is definitely on the roadmap. It'd be a very cool thing to do. DCB is largely separated into 3 stores. So we have a transaction store, the kind of bib aggregation, and consortial metadata. This turned out to be super important, as you might expect. There's a component we call outbound index. This here is kind of where I draw the line for my team. DCB stops at this point. There is no discovery service, actually. What I can do is I can inject records from the aggregation into a discovery service. So what we do have on the side is we push those records into an index. This is Elasticsearch or OpenSearch. And then we have another component, which is the DCB locate adapter. So this is how locate will talk to the DCB index. But actually, I see very much a hard line here. This is where DCB's boundary is. And then we've created some other components. Adam is on Slack. And I'm going to murder the name of his product because I always do. I think it's Piker. It might be Pika. It's Piker. It's Piker. It's definitely Piker. Adam wants to do Piker. I think underneath there is, which one's under there? Anyway, there's another discovery service. It is super important that we do not stovepipe. It's probably viewfind, sorry. That we don't stovepipe this solution to any one discovery system. That would be a huge mistake. I do that to death.
Sorry?
Left. Yeah. Oh, shit. Okay. Right. Let's skip over all that. What has worked? I regret deeply not using UUID5 identifiers for folios, ERM modules, agreements, and licenses. This has been so cool. We screwed up royally when we didn't use this. UUID5 identifiers, instead of being the random things that you get, those big longer strings of digits you'll have seen in folio, UUID5s basically give us stable identifiers. So we hash together the source of the record and the ID of the record from the source. The UUID is always the same for a particular item from a particular catalog. That has enabled us to do some very, very cool things. In particular, our cluster identifiers are the ID of a bibliographic record that we've chosen to represent the cluster, which gives us another very cool thing that I'll show. Materialized clusters. We can have many clusters, many different ways of clustering the records, but we actually physically manifest and materialize those clusters in a table so that we've got the data. We know how things have been grouped. Dynamic clustering didn't work. It wasn't performant enough for us. The discovery scaffold, using that to parallelize development. So I said there was that hard border. Discovery scaffold is basically how we prove to ourselves that our interfaces work. And then we just throw the interface at the locate team, who do great work, but that's their problem as far as I'm concerned. So the discovery scaffold is really good. We're using Keycloak as an identity provider. That has been a game changer. Absolutely. What I said I'd do is, here we go. Frank Lloyd, since we're in Chicago. This is, Donna will be sick of me saying, this is not Mobius's discovery service. This is the discovery scaffold. This is what the development team use to prove to ourselves that our interfaces work. This is how I know that DCB is not only used by locate, because actually the team never see a locate interface. They only ever see this. And this is what we'll give to the Piker developers and to a viewfind developer. I was talking to somebody yesterday who was going to do that. This is how they can talk to the interfaces and compare what the service is giving them with what they can make manifest in a discovery system. So you'll have to forgive the crappy interface. They don't let me design anything, and that's why. What I will do, though, is if I click on Frank Lloyd Wright, see the spinner there that's going? Ooh, it worked. That's doing real-time availability. This looks back to the streaming. Lower of 2 feet. The streaming interfaces I talked about, it's really important that we're able to just push a request out to all the downstream systems and then collate the stream of data that comes back. Those are real-time calls out to N backend library management systems. We do have a caching layer, so we can, when I try and display real-time availability, one of the things I can do is to say that the spinner might go for 10 seconds. And at some point, the backend can say, you know what? KC Towers isn't going to respond. I'm going to give you what I knew from last time, and maybe I'll update that later on. But as it turns out, in this case, we've got real-time availability coming back from all the services. And that's how we know what we can borrow. Big thing on the column, hold count. So we generally don't place requests on things that have got that are in a hold queue. So those wouldn't be requested. Requestable is a back-end algorithm where we're working out whether we can loan something or not. And status code available. Obviously, some things are reference only or for some reason off the shelf. So we would only try and request something that was available. This is the scaffold. This is what the developers use to make sure the system is working well. One of the things it's doing is saying, in this cluster, these are the member records. You will see that the interesting thing here is there are 2 Frank Lloyd Wright records from KC Towers, different IDs. That smells bad to me. What's going on there? Now, if I scroll down further, we do the record blocking in 2 different ways. So here's the Gold Rush key, which we took a great deal of inspiration from the innovative documentation on building Gold Rush keys. We also use this, a more simple blocking title. This has actually turned out to be just as good. What's going on behind the scenes is, in that second phase of clustering, we are missing a rule for this item, which means that we've accidentally clustered 2 records together that shouldn't be. And as Tim said, we think we're going to be developing this until the end of time and getting the long tail of the rules right. But, that's life. We're happy about that. If I come up here and click login, discover scaffold, not meant to look pretty. What this screen is doing is saying, hey, please tell me where you're from. And we can have as many identity providers as we want in here. You might know that Sierra does have a patron identification mechanism, as does Polaris, as does Folio. But what we want is a common way of authenticating. So we're using Keycloak to turn all those backend systems into OIDC compliant JWTs. So when I log on to Springfield Green, try and look on Springfield Green. There we go. So this will take a few seconds because it really is reaching out to a system to see whether this patron is allowed to log on. And if I very quickly look at the profile here. So I don't want to, speak ill of Sierra. I don't think Sierra has a system where patrons can get a JWT out of Sierra. And what we're doing here is using Sierra as a backend system to mint a JWT, which means that we can basically use this patron identity in lots of downstream services. I'm going to very quickly. How long have I done? Oh, crikey, where's my presentation?
Questions in the chat too.
I wanted to show this. This is an image viewer, and it's using IIIF, which is a technology for viewing images. I happen to favor IIIF as the way of doing controlled digital lending. But what's really interesting about this is this interface knows about the logged in user, and it's capable of rendering this image at this level of resolution for the world to see. So anybody can see this. Like if you were Library of Congress and you've got a beautifully, hand annotated world map, you might want to let the world have access to, the scroll down, the zoomed out image of that. What you might not want to do is to let people zoom into that infinitely until they'd actually identify themselves. So I come along with my Tulsa library card and I say, hey, DCB, I'm from Tulsa. Can you verify that I really am a patron and I'm allowed to see resources? DCB could say back to LC, yes, this really is a Tulsa patron. Go ahead. And what will happen then is that using something like IIIF, I get the ability, to do infinite zoom, and hopefully that will Do full screen. What should be happening then is that it should be downloading super high resolution scans. Not going to work. God of demos. Sorry, I wanted to finish on a high and it hasn't quite worked. In theory, what should be happening here is the system should have said, hey, this is a user who's got an identity. You can have access to the super high res scan. And that could equally be, we have passed you through a copyright clearance process. That means you have CDL access to an item. So the best thing about CDL is we are building a set of services that we can plug together in different ways to build new kinds of patron experiences and to try and meet patrons where they are, rather than kind of, making them come to us. Like 30 seconds for questions. I'm sorry for going on.
Actually, Adam answered the questions in it. Yeah, so I think we've got those covered. But are there any other questions we can answer? It's not enough coffee.
Everybody's been very patient. Good luck.
Yes, we should. Yes. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming and appreciate your time. Thank you.